Welcome everyone to the first DataBeers Brussels.
Yay!
Hello, everybody. Are we all unmuted? Charlotte, can you unmute us all? Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so glad to see everybody. Welcome to the first online DataBeers Brussels event. So first thing I want to tell everybody is cheers. I hope you have your beers. Cheers. I also want everybody to show we have a new t-shirts thanks to our sponsor, Brussels Business and Decision. So please, everybody, show your t-shirts. Okay, so let's start with a little intro about what is this that we are doing here. So what is DataBeers? DataBeers is an international event. It started in Madrid, I think 2014. And since then, it spread to many, many cities all around the world. This list is not up to date. I think there's at least 22 cities and in many different continents. So there are also like Latin America, there are Philippines, I think, and no, Kuala Lumpur, I don't know. There are a lot of continents, so there's happening all around the world. So how does it work? How do you change slides here? Okay, so there are two elements. First is data. So we have short stories about data. So each story is 7 minutes, not more than that. And they should be for general audience, so no codes, no formulas, and it shouldn't be about advertising your company. So although your company obviously is going to be mentioned, but people should learn something, not just how awesome the company is. This is during the live events, we are usually drinking beer while it's all happening, and after that we go to the pub. However, this is not going to happen this time, unfortunately. So how is things going to work this time? So this, if you are using Zoom in French, which I don't know why would you do, but if you do, this is the screen you see in front of you. And we would like, you know, it's kind of boring if it's just, you just listen and talk. So we'd like you to interact with us. And you can do it the following way. So first you have, on the bottom, you can see 3 icons. First one, if you use it in English, would say chat. So can everybody click on the chat, and on the side, they will see this panel and use this to tell us where are they coming from. So where are you exactly now? So everybody, so I don't know, Charlotte, how can I see what are people writing without going on through? Are people writing?
Yes, yes. So we have people from Sweden, Halle, Madrid, Brussels, Berlin. So yeah, all over the place, actually. That's quite cool. Cambridge. So yeah, even international guests. So that's super nice.
Okay, super. So the other very important part of this is beer. So we hope you all are having a beer with you, like we do. If it's Belgian, you get extra points. Can you now tell us which beer are you drinking? So Charlotte, can you read the comments?
So I see left.
Okay, you're blocked. Okay.
So I see someone with no beers, Vedette Estrella de Galicia, something like this. Ipa
Okay.
Mau, Lust for Life. Wow. Maretsu Triple, and of course, Omer, the best beer in the world.
Okay, nice. So we have a diverse selection. Nice. Okay, so this is one way you can interact with us. So feel free to write something in a chat, express your admiration for what's going on. If you critique us, if you want to critique us, we are going to have a survey. So please do that using the survey. So we are very happy to hear your feedbacks. So you can do it this way. Another way you can interact.
A little thing here from YouTube. I also have like people drinking Grimbergen from Lithuania, and somebody from Canada who is drinking coffee.
But in Canada, well, it's a morning, yeah. So it's that's understandable, yeah. Yeah. So another way you can interact with us, you can raise your hand. So if you click on the middle one, you can raise your hand, and then in participants we can see you, and we can allow you to talk. So you can you can use to ask questions. But a better way, you can also click on the right button. There is a Q&R in French, so Q&A in English. And you can write your question there, and then everybody can upvote it. So in case we have too many questions to go through all of them, we can just go through the questions which are the most popular. So whoever wrote down that question will be asked to ask the question themselves, you know? So this is how it's going to work. So who are we? So we're a diverse group of generally, let's say, data scientists in a certain way. Some of us work in industry, some of us work in academia. We started all this, what was it the year? 2016. So we had already 14 events. We have 4 or 5 every year. It was started by me and myself, Jelena, and Lito. And this is actually probably the last event Lito will be joining, because unfortunately he's leaving us. But fortunately for him, he got a permanent position in Maastricht. So, you know, we are very happy for him that he is going to go there. And maybe, who knows, there might be DataBeers Maastricht, so very time soon. But we are losing Lito, but we got Charlotte. So Charlotte is our new member, and we already don't know how we've been doing anything without her before. So she's the master of the ceremony, and she's hosting all this and taking care of all the technical details. So we are probably a lot of times saying, Charlotte, what's going on? So that's it. And then, who are you? Who are you? So Charlotte, can you try to start the poll? So this is also a way we are going to interact with you. So there is a poll here. So please present yourself. So we would like to know your background. So you can be working with data in academia, working with data in industry, and then not working with data, but belonging to academia and industry. So please, please vote. And please tell us, have you ever been to the live event, or this is the first time you're joining us here this way? So I'm going to continue talking. We can leave the poll open until the end of the presentation, and then we can read the results. So let's see, who are the speakers? So this is very important. I don't know if you guys heard, there is this thing going on. It's called COVID-19. It might or might not be the reason we are doing this online. I don't know, we'll never know. And we decided, like, to, you know, it's kind of unavoidable. We need to have some talk. We need to talk about this. And people might be tired, but I also think that there's like a lot of talk about it around, but there's also a lot of nonsense. So we wanted to have some people who are experts in this and they actually know what they're talking about. So that's going to be Jose and Pieter. They're going to have some kind of COVID-related talks. But for all of you who are tired of talking about COVID, we also have Ruben and Neema, we are very grateful that Ruben stepped in for Patricia last minute, who had to leave due to some sad circumstances. And we have Neema actually, and that's our first speaker coming from Africa. We're super happy that we got somebody, and she's going to also tell us a bit how things are there. And now, little data story. In every intro, we always have a little data story, and we of course will have to talk about COVID-19. All are we? COVID-19 brought to attention some expressions. So here on this graph, you can see the Google trend for the term exponential growth. So you can see that in the last couple of years, so from 2016 until now, the level was maximum, let's say 50, 60. And then suddenly, just recently, the term became much more searched. And apparently, if you look just at this period, which is the peak is actually mid-March, so just when the confinement started. So just before the confinement, we had exponential growth of the term exponential growth on. So that's kind of cool. If you have some data story, which is a bit longer and more interesting of the data story I just said, please let us know. So we are really open for new speakers. So if you want, now we can have you from all around the world. Please let us know. We then usually we take people for beers, but now it's going to be virtual video call, and then maybe you can join us later. As I mentioned before, after every event, we are sending a survey. So this is very important to us. So please give the feedback to us, and so we know what should we do next time and what we shouldn't do next time. Thank you. So I would like to thank our sponsor, Business and Decision. Moonpunt is usually hosting us. Now we are in a virtual environment. If you want to get in touch, this is our website. It's very easy, DataBeers.Brussels. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And if you can write to us to the email databeersbrussels@gmail.com. So let's start going back. So what are the results of the pool? So what's your background? We have academia. So data in academia is 55%, so majority. Then we have 31% from industry, and 14% of people is actually not doing data. So that's interesting. Usually we think these people are only like beers, but I don't know why they're here now. So, but you're very welcome. We're glad you're here. And 59% have been to the live event and 41 didn't. So wow, that's very interesting. Okay.
Welcome new joiners.
Excuse me?
Welcome new joiners.
Yes, so all of you, welcome. Very, very happy to have you around. So let's go to the main event, and main event are our speakers. So our first speaker, so Charlotte, maybe you can launch the poll. So before every speaker, we are going to have a little poll which about their topic. So is it launched? Yes, okay, now. Okay, so Jose passed the ultimate test of bravery because he was my supervisor for my PhD, which is not very easy task. So luckily he had help. So he was not the only one. He was helped by Ansho, and we used to call them our parents, and Jose was the mother. So Jose comes from Madrid, from Universiteit Hasselt de Madrid. And he's a physicist by background. He used to do, let's say clean physics. I don't know how you call that, pure physics. And but nowadays, what he does is complex systems. So among data scientists, I think the complex systems are should be very interesting, but somehow they're not as popular. And I really wanted to have more talks in these data events which come about complex systems. So that's why Jose is here. So maybe let's see the results of the poll. Okay, so the questions were, do you know what is SIR model? yes. So 30% had no experience. 23% says, I heard in the news, but they don't, not really sure. And 47%, yes, it's a SEER model is the night of the round tables. Okay, well done.
Of course.
So yeah. And then do you know what chaos is about? Yes, 37% studied. 30% learned from Jurassic Park. 23% heard about butterfly effect. And then 10% had no idea. So Jose, you can set up your slides.
Okay.
And so Jose is going to tell us like why it's so difficult to predict anything about this infection. So
can you hear me?
The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you see the full picture in full screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll begin. So thank you, Yelena. Well, this picture here shows what the weather forecast was like in the 60s and 70s when I was a child. It looks clumsy, but actually it was clumsy. They made a forecast for the next day, and we all loved it because they hardly ever got it right. This is what it looks like today. It looks more professional, and we all rely on these predictions to make to any plan, especially if we have outdoor plans. I want you to focus on two features of this image here. First is there's a time window of 10 days, as opposed to 1 day that was the forecast 50 years ago. But there's a time window nonetheless. And we all know that the longer the time for the forecast, the less reliable it is, right? And the second feature is here. We are no longer told tomorrow is going to rain, but tomorrow's probability of rain is 90%, 80%, or whatever. Okay, what happened in between these two pictures? Well, for starters, we have massive data of a high accuracy and resolution, thanks to the technological breakthroughs like the weather satellites, for instance. Also, because we have powerful computers now, compared to the ones they had in the 50s, sorry, in the 60s, we have high resolution models with a very detailed description of the evolution of the atmosphere and the interaction with the oceans and the lands. And finally, in the late 60s, Edward Lorenz discovered chaos, and he found that the equations of the weather are chaotic. And in case you don't remember what chaos is from the picture, Jurassic Park, I have here another picture that can make it clear. You have here 6 replicas of the same experiment with a system which is chaotic. It's the double pendulum. They all start doing the same, but by now you should notice that the 4th one is doing something different, slightly different from the other 5. And if you wait a little longer and look at the 6th one, you will see that it's not doing quite the same as the other 5, or as the other 4. And if you wait a little longer, each one is doing something completely different. So this is the fingerprint of chaos. The chaos means that if a system is chaotic, if you start preparing systems in exactly, or what you think is exactly the same conditions, and the tiny difference get amplified over time, and in a very short time, each one is following a completely different path. In this situation, making deterministic predictions is impossible, and all you can hope is to make probabilistic predictions. And that's the reason why we speak about probability of rain tomorrow, etc. Okay, but why am I talking about weather forecast if I'm supposed to talk about epidemic forecast? Well, the reason is this is a good model to look at because the situation we are in epidemic forecasting is the situation we were in the 60s in the weather forecast, and for the same 3 reasons. First, we have data of very poor quality. For instance, the testing of people for COVID-19 was different and less reliable at the beginning of the epidemic than now, now that we have passed the worst part of the epidemic in some parts of the world, of course. Also, the gathering of data using different protocols was sometimes inconsistent, and you produce time series like the one I'm showing in this picture here, which is the number of accumulated deaths by COVID-19 in Spain, which should be, of course, an increasing curve. But you can see here that something strange is happening at the end. So this denotes that there's something weird going on with the data. So the data are not reliable. Also, if you look at the official number of deaths by COVID-19 in Spain, and you compare it with the excess number of deaths in the same period obtained comparing with what happened in years, some years before, you see that there is a discrepancy of around 20,000 people. So clearly we are undercounting the number of deaths. So the data are not reliable. Also, the models are too simplistic. The models, like the famous SIR model, what they do is they just classify people in a few categories according to the situation with respect to the disease. And they describe the passing from one category to another by very simple mathematical equations. This is much too coarse-grained description for such a complex system. And what you get is not accurate, of course. It's not expected to be accurate, although it provides insight about the evolution of the epidemic. And that's why these models are used. And the third problem is that there is an inherent uncertainty. And this is something that we have just discovered. I'm showing here in this picture in logarithmic scale here and in linear scale here, I'm showing data for the number of active cases in March in Spain. And we have fit this data with a model which is typical, which is a typical SIR-like model, like the one I've shown before. You can see that the fit is pretty good for as long as there are data. And when you extrapolate to the future, because of the small inaccuracies that there are in the determination of the parameters, there are big uncertainties that grow over time when you make a forecast. And you can predict either that the curve bends down, as it fortunately happened, or that the epidemic will go on without control. Okay, you can blame on the data for this problem, of course, because you know the motto, garbage in, garbage out. So if you put lousy data, you get lousy results. So we wanted to make sure whether this is the problem of data. And for that, we need perfect data. How do you generate perfect data? You just generate them with the same model you're using to fit the data. So of course, this is what I'm showing in this picture. Of course, the fit is perfect until the last data. And then if you extrapolate to the future, because of the tiny inaccuracies in the determination of the parameters, the indetermination grows. And of course, is smaller than in the previous case because the data are perfect in this case, but still there is a huge uncertainty and the outcomes can be incompatible in the, if time passes. So can we do better than this? Well, the answer is yes, if we look at the example of the weather forecast. And we have to do exactly what they did in the last 50 years. So we need high quality data, probably including mobility data, tracking the phones, mobile phones for people, because mobility is important here in epidemics. We need very detailed and microscopic model, but this shouldn't be a problem because we have enough computing power to do that. And of course, we have to admit that the only possibility is to do probabilistic forecasting because of this inherent inaccuracy of the models. So in summary, there is in every country, there is a state agency of meteorology like this one in Spain. Well, what we need is a similar institution, but for epidemiology in every country. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, José. So if you have questions, please do not hesitate to post them in the Q&A or raise your hand so I can give you the word directly. So let me check whether there are questions coming in. Also, maybe during the next talks, you can ask questions during the talk so people can upvote during the talk. So let's wait. Okay, so I have the first question from Nick. I will give you the word now, Nick. Let me just find you. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, so you are speaking about a SIR-like model to predict the cases. Now, I was just curious, what modifications do you make if you speak about the SIR-like model? Are these additional states or is there something else?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last, the end of the question.
Yeah, so do you then have additional states? So you have susceptible, infected, recovered. Are there then additional states like you can get sick again, or?
Well, in the case of the feed the model we use to feed the data, what we use is what we did is to introduce a new category, which is people who are confined. So we have susceptible people, people who are confined, infected, and recover or dead. So this is the only states we have included here.
Ah, yes. All right. Thank you.
But yeah, if I can follow on that, if you use model which is a bit more complicated, so some version of SIR, would this story change? Like, would it make much better easier to predict what's going on?
No, actually, I think it's the opposite. I mean, if you introduce more states, you introduce more parameters, and it's the same problem, because the reason why there is this uncertainty in the prediction, in the forecasting, is because there is an exponential growth, and exponential growth amplifies any difference. So you have tiny indeterminations or tiny inaccuracies in the determination of parameters. This will amplify in the future. And if you have more parameters, you have more inaccuracies. So it's probably worse.
Okay, so can I ask a follow-up question on?
Someone is saying there's a question on YouTube.
Okay, let's see.
I don't know, but you can ask a question on follow-up, Johan.
Yes, okay. And then we'll go to the question.
I can read the question from YouTube if you want. So Anton Nagolyuk is asking, how can we rely on data if many countries fake data on purpose? The cloud will not hide themselves like authoritarian regimes will hide the death numbers. The clouds, I guess he was thinking because in methodology, the clouds are obvious, but in predicting this, we also have a lot of fake data.
Yeah. That's a big problem, of course. I mean, actually, one of the main problems is the data. We don't have anything close to accurate data. I mean, the data we have are completely unreliable. So even if the system was not inherently unpredictable, because of the lousy data that we have, we couldn't predict anything. Yeah, I mean, this is the big problem. This is something that countries have to solve somehow.
Okay, thanks. So Johan?
Yes, I wondered, so in the end, so you want to predict, I think the most important thing we want to know is whether it's positive feedback, like exponential growth, or it's leveling off. And I wondered, are there other implicit methods to estimate whether there will be a positive feedback or not?
Not that I know of. I mean, and I doubt that there exists, because, as I said, that there's an inherent unpredictability because of the way that the system evolves. I mean, in the phase that is growing, it has very little information of what it's going to do in the future. So what you try to extract is almost impossible to extract from this data. So the uncertainty is too big. So if you want to predict when is the peak going to happen, all you can say is, from the data I have and my extrapolation, there is a, I don't know, 30% of probability that we reach this peak, or 40 or whatever, right? And once, I mean, assuming that this peak will occur, you can also estimate what is the probability that will happen in a week, in 2 weeks' time, or whatever. But that's the only thing we can hope for.
But it could be interesting to know the sensitivities. How sensitive is the outcome to some macroscopic parameters, for example, that can be used for policy making? I don't know.
Well, it's extremely sensitive. That's the problem. It's extremely sensitive. Actually, you have to accept that there is a time window. We don't know how far does this window extend, but probably 2 or 3 days. That would be, I mean, it would be an achievement, right? So all you can hope for is whether what I'm doing is going in the right direction or not. But you cannot go beyond that because it's impossible, right? The equations forbid it. Essentially, not the equations, the dynamics forbid it.
The dynamics, yes. Okay. Are there more questions from the audience? It's your time is now. Okay. I'm just going to wait a few seconds. No questions on YouTube?
Not other, but there is a remark from the audience, which is that we wouldn't have discussed chaos theory if there were no strong sensitivity.
No, of course, but what I meant is that the parameters that determine the chaotic characteristics, maybe we can get some more information. Okay, let's go to the second speaker then, which is Pieter Libin. Charlotte, could you launch the poll? So while I'll introduce Pieter Libin, we'll talk about the same, a similar topic. So Pieter is a PhD in computer science. He graduated, obtained his PhD very recently at our lab. He's really, I can tell, an excellent researcher. But he has a love, and he has a love for life sciences and multidisciplinary research. He investigates COVID now with Niels Hans, who is famous in Belgium for his research, and will soon be doing FWO postdoc, so fundamental research, to introduce new models to control emerging epidemics. He loves his daughter, cats, and hiking. So apparently his wife is not in the list, which is very interesting, and loves tinkering with computers. So let's have a look at the poll. So we asked 2 questions. Which animal is COVID-19 coming from? So it's a multiple choice. And what is reinforcement learning? And we're looking at the results. So 16% of the speakers think that the animal comes from North Korea, because there was a unicorn spotted, according to Kim Jong-un, in North Korea, which is interesting. And then 46 and 67% think it's from pangolin and a bat. And if I remember well, but Peter, you have to correct me, they could come from both sources, animals.
Yes.
And then we have the second question on reinforcement learning, which is learning to behave properly in an environment. It's like how to raise your children, what they used for AlphaGo, and 10% doesn't know. So we have a quite knowledgeable audience. This being said, I will stop talking now and leave the floor to you, Peter.
Thank you, Jan. Probably have to sleep on the couch tonight, but anyway, I will start. So today we'll talk about how we can use AI to perhaps control the next pandemic. And over the last couple of months, we all have gotten a live demonstration what an epidemic can do. And it might be that you have gotten ill because of COVID, or maybe even friends or family of you died of it. And next to the direct burden of the virus on public health, it also had a big impact on our economy due to the extreme measures that we used to try to curb the pandemic. And this signifies the importance to control epidemics. And to do this, governments need to make decisions on which measures will be most effective. And this includes limiting the mobility, as during the COVID epidemic, entire countries were in lockdown, the closing of schools, but also administering vaccines or drugs to control the epidemic. And this is a hard job, given the stochastic nature of epidemic processes, and also the complex human behavior that is behind of these processes. And to better understand how pathogens move throughout a population, and also to evaluate prevention strategies, we typically use epidemiological models, like already said by José. And even with such models, it is still very challenging to come up with efficient prevention strategies. And this is because at every time step of the epidemic, we need to make a decision. And it is very hard to foresee how these decisions will impact the epidemic. And therefore, in my PhD research, I investigated the use of artificial intelligence to control epidemics. And more specifically, I used reinforcement learning. Now, reinforcement learning, what is it? It is about a computer program that wants to learn how to behave optimally in an environment. And in artificial intelligence terminology, we call this program an agent, but this can also be a doc, an entity that wants to learn something. So let's have a look at an example where we have an environment that is the Super Mario video game that we all know, I think. And here the agent wants to learn how to play this game optimally, which means obtaining the highest score. And to do this, the agent can control the game or the environment by pushing buttons on the gamepad. And this is what we call executing an action. And when an action is executed, the agent can have a look at the screen, like we would also be able to do when playing this game. We can have a look at the screen to see what's happening. The agent also receives a reward, which is quite essential in the context of reinforcement learning. And in this game, it will be the score of the game, the current score of the game. And through performing actions, the agent aims to learn what action to execute when seeing a particular screen. And the aim is then to maximize the score at the end of the game. And the agent does that through trial and error, very much like a human being would do. We would also try out different things to see what happens. But for the computer program to make this possible, it needs to do some bookkeeping. And basically that is recording a table of all possible combinations of actions and states, and carefully writing down the preferences for each of these combinations. And this approach has been shown to work very well when you have a small state space and a small action space, like for example, in a simple grid world, where a maze, where you have a floor plan that is your state, and you have the position of a mouse that wants to look for the cheese. However, if we have an environment like a Super Mario video game, this table would be huge. It would be completely untractable. And therefore, we will try to approximate this table using what we call a deep neural network. And this enables us to investigate realistic problems, like, for example, the AlphaGo. And you might have heard of this kind of neural networks because they're a very powerful approximator, and they have been used to investigate a lot of challenging machine learning problems. And when we generalize the bookkeeping with a deep neural network, we call this deep reinforcement learning. Now, what does a video game have to do with an epidemic? That's a good question. Because it turns out that from a mathematical perspective, a strategy to learn a video game, to play a video game, or to control an epidemic is actually quite similar. And what I did in my research is I formulated the quest for an optimal prevention strategy as a reinforcement learning problem. And I used an epidemiological model as an environment to learn in. And this epidemiological model then functions as a reinforcement learning environment, as you can see here. And the actions will consist out of prevention measures, such as, for example, closing the school or vaccinating people. And to learn a realistic policy, we also need to take into account a realistic epidemiological model. And therefore, we investigated the use of a meta-population model. That is a geospatial model that simulates different districts. And more specifically, we considered a model for pandemic influenza for all 400 districts in Great Britain. And again, as in the Super Mario video game, this environment has a huge number of possible states. And we will use again deep reinforcement learning to deal with this problem. And in this model, our aim is to learn an optimal policy to close schools when a pandemic of influenza occurs. So we want to learn in which districts to close the schools and at which stage of the epidemic, such that we can minimize the number of infections that are generated. And in this research, we were able to learn a policy that considers different districts jointly. And we were able to show that this joint approach improves upon each district making its own decisions. And this reinforcement learning framework that we propose is a generic method. And that means that it can be used in combination with any kind of epidemiological model, and therefore also to study other pathogens. And currently we're in the progress to use it in the context of COVID-19, to see whether we can learn a strategy to respond appropriately to local outbreaks. Because we see that while the virus is in some countries under control, you still have these local outbreaks that induce problems. There are some limitations to the approach that we formulated as an informative epidemiological model needs to be provided. And to set up such model, we need some key epidemiological parameters like the reproduction number that specifies the average number of new infections one infected individual generates, but also the incubation time. And as in the previous presentation was already said, this will typically be very hard to know at the beginning of the epidemic. And therefore, to really respond directly to a pandemic that comes out of nowhere, a more dynamic approach will be necessary. And an approach that actually gradually incorporates the available knowledge and considers the uncertainty that there is due to limited data in this decision-making process. And this is exactly the kind of methodology that I plan to develop over the next 3 years, thanks to funding from the Flemish Research Foundation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Pieter. So are there any questions? Please post them in the Q&A box. For the people who don't have a question, you can go and grab a beer. Maybe next time we need like
I have a question.
Okay, Jelena, go.
So like two things. First, how does this connect to what Jose was telling us, like the complexity of the problem, how reinforcement learning can help us deal with just the problematic nature of the dynamic of the system? And the second, what are the things which you learned but were not intuitive? Like what about, closing the schools or, any kind of a strategy, is not like, how much is that better of what you would intuitively just do?
Yes, the first question, there are actually two problems. There is the trying to know as much as we can. And this is indeed a problem. Learning or fitting a model solely on data will be very difficult, solely on incidence data. And therefore, I'm planning to look into genetic sequences, as these also contain a lot of information, to try to use them to also support epidemiological models. And for example, combining them together with individual-based models that allow a very fine-grained modeling. But it will always be very difficult in the beginning of an epidemic. Well, it is really ongoing. You have this phase that there is so much uncertainty. So reinforcement learning could allow us to learn policies that take into account this uncertainty, that let us perform actions that actually take into account that there is a lot of things that we don't know. So the next research will really be try to combine these as much as possible to come to something that can propose a policy that is better than what we have now, closing up everything. But also don't forget, COVID, it's a bad pandemic, but there might be pandemics with the measles like R0, that is 12 or 18, and mortality that might be much higher. So this could really be very, very bad. So knowing what to do in these circumstances will still be very important. And then your second question was about what I learned. So from a perspective of learning new things, my PhD was more of coming up with new methodologies and trying to develop a framework to do this kind of things in. And I was able to confirm several findings from other researchers, but the fact that looking at different districts jointly to come up with a good policy, that is something that was really new, and this can really make a big difference. So that's an interesting thing for pandemic influenza, but this could also, for example, help for in the context of Ebola epidemics.
Okay, thank you. There is a question on the Q&A.
Yes. So from Nick Verhelst. Yeah, Nick, I will give you the word. I will unmute you. Here you go.
Yes, yeah, I'm comparing a little bit with influenza because I remember that that's Neil Hence's research topic. But yeah, do you have a reproduction number for the different age groups in your model, or is it one number for all? So are the children actually also the motor in the COVID-19 epidemic according to your model?
Well, the model that the work that I presented was all in the context of pandemic influenza, and there's a completely different epidemic than COVID. Indeed, their children are a very important driver in the epidemic, and from what we see now in COVID, this seems not to be the case. First of all, children seem to be less susceptible, and also they seem to be less symptomatic, and from what we can tell now, because this also is still seeping in this information, but it looks like they're also less infective. So it's a completely different epidemic, and closing schools, this is still be under an investigation, might have had much less effect than, for example, in an influenza epidemic. And this shows that it is important to get to know an epidemic, but as we cannot do that from the beginning, it also makes sense to come up with policies that try to compensate for this missing knowledge. That is what I will try to do now. A bit.
So you are treating people of different age differently, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I use is an age-structured SEIR model, which is a variant of the SIR model, but in a meta-population structure. So you have an age-structured SIR model for each district, and you have communication mobility between the districts. And closing schools is then simply changing the amount of contacts between children, and that is how that can be implemented. And that is how I did it in this work.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I also would like to ask.
Ruben, go.
Jose, go first.
Okay. How sensitive is the system to different epidemiological models? I mean, if you change the model, what happens? You get completely different outcomes. You get something that is coherent with the others. I mean, because in models you can introduce many categories. You can make a stratification by age. You can introduce mobility of people. You can introduce whatever you want. So, how sensitive is to that?
That's a very good question. So in this work, I focused on pandemic influenza, but the model that I use for learning, the reinforcement learning model, it's a deep learning model that takes into account the entire state of the epidemiological model. So there is no prior knowledge introduced whatsoever, and the reinforcement learning agent actually learns just from this, like in the Mario that you learn just by looking at the television. So in principle, this means that you could use this to any kind of epidemiological model, also more complex models like individual-based models or other meta-population models. And that is now the next step that I will start looking at. But I think this is a very powerful thing about deep reinforcement learning, that you can learn without having much prior knowledge there.
Okay, so you actually need the model to generate the data from which you learn, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Well, actually, it's you interact with the model. So the model does something. The model generates infections. Okay, I close schools now. Okay, the less infections or nothing happens or more infections, and then I see that. Okay, then I learn from that. And this iterative loop. Interacting with the epidemiological model is how you come up with policies, with dynamic policies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ruben?
Yeah.
You still have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. It's for both Pieter and Jose. I come from a different side of the world, but I'm pretty interested in all the COVID stuff, and we are trying to do stuff in the part of the mobility. If we can gather mobility data that is useful for you guys. But the problem is it's impossible. So basically, my question is more on the philosophical level. For instance, I have been very involved in a debate that has been very intense. That has to do with the data protection versus health security of the population. Has been a very intense debate, and the conclusion is that the governments don't want to have any scandals. So basically, they opted for the easy way, and basically the mobility data that is going to be available is not going to be enough, right, for epidemiology. That's my conclusion, and this is not going to happen ever. So with this limitation that we impose ourselves in the gathering of the data, we are not going to have quality data probably for many years. What we really can do to fight these pandemics, because I'm trying to talk to colleagues and convince them that our job as engineers or the research that we do is just provide you guys with the best quality data we could, and you are the ones that can help build these models that then come to doctors and the medical side, and and this is a chain, right? But I feel that on the very basic, we are failing, right? And I have little hope that this can be fixed, and I want you to give me hopes. If we cannot fix this, what you can do, guys, even if you have a very bad quality data.
Well, I have two answers to you. Well,
Yeah.
One is, I've heard that there are protocols in which you can gather data without, completely anonymous.
Yeah, but
without actually tracking people. It's the mobile that is connecting to some place and gathering some numbers, and they are completely anonymous. So it only informs you that you have been in contact with people who had COVID. So in that case, you're not collecting anything from people in this respect. And the other thing is, I think the current opinion of governments and people, etc., about this issue is because the disease we're dealing with is COVID-19. Suppose it is Ebola or something more dangerous, something with a higher rate of mortality than this one. Would the opinion would be the same or not?
Yeah, good answer. To the first one is right. There are solutions like the one you mentioned. Problem of that one is that you need everyone to install from scratch new application in the mobile phone, and we have. They have tried this in Singapore and some other countries, and it didn't work because there is a huge amount of the people that don't care. And then basically how you manage to get these people to install this type of application. This is a difficult problem. Anyway, the second one I like very much the answer. Let's just force the hands of governments, and then probably they change their mind.
Pieter, do you want to add something to this discussion?
No, I think indeed these are very pertinent questions, and I think it's indeed something to think about. But also, I think there are other ways to collect data, like genetic sequences, that might be helpful. And also, maybe this can give the momentum for governments to think about the next pandemic, because the next pandemic might be already happening as we speak here. There might be some guy eating a pangolin somewhere, so we don't know that. So being prepared is everything, and we can be much better prepared than we are now. And I think it really would be worthwhile to try to make this, that maybe the next generation, if something like this happens, the effects could be better mitigated.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Pieter. It's would you, in reinforcement learning, you have this trade-off, exploration, exploitation, and so you say we have to learn about the pandemic. Would you advise policymakers over the world to try different stuff in the beginning, like to explore? That is a very difficult question. Well, there are ways around it. I think you cannot
experiment, really experiment in the real world. That will be very difficult, but what you can do is use a model to learning. You do stuff in simulation and experiment there. And that could help them to come up with a better informed idea to actually execute something in the real world, because that's a different step. But yeah, these are things that still need to be developed. I will be working on that now in the next years, but this is very challenging indeed.
Okay. Thank you. Then let's move to the next speaker, Ruben. So Charlotte, can you launch the poll? Who will leave the topic of COVID for now and move into online advertising? The CV of Ruben, who is the stand-in of Patricia Calejo, is really impressive. He is associate professor at the Telematics group of the engineering department of the University Carlos III in Madrid, co-author of more than 70 papers, participated in more than 25 projects. His interests are online advertisement, transparency of the web, privacy, and specifically also the application of these learnings in other disciplines. And his work has been presented or featured in national and international media like BBC and so on. The list is too long to mention everything, so I'll leave the floor to you, Ruben, to explain us what you do.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. First of all, just acknowledge that this talk was prepared and was supposed to be given by Patricia, but unfortunately even didn't allow her to make it. So, but I keep the slides and her name in the slide because it's the first thing to do. So, well, this is about why online advertisers shouldn't rely on anyone to assess how well their advertising campaigns work. And I'm going to try just to share this with you and hope I convince you. And why is that? Why advertisers shouldn't trust the current online advertising ecosystem? And the answer is this, what you see in the slide. It's a black box, right? So, and this is how the online advertising ecosystem behaves. We have advertisers that wants to put their ads in web pages, in mobile apps, and they do it through this black box. And the only thing they get in exchange to know if the campaign worked properly is some report they get from their vendors. But they cannot assess the accuracy, the completeness, the level of trust that the report has. And indeed, if we go to the news, what we find is some scary cases in which not just small players, but big fishes like Facebook or Google are repeatedly identified as agents that are manipulating these reports and inflating some metrics to make more money. So this is the reason why advertisers shouldn't be trusting the current ecosystem. And why this is a black box, why it operates as a black box? And the answer is in the slides. So you can see this, this figure is just a summary of how the online advertising looks like nowadays. So the problem is too complex, right? It's truly too complex to understand every single bit of it for an advertiser and what each one of these players do and how it has to do with the performance of their campaign. And this makes it to be the black box dimension. And basically our goal is this, is try to open at least a bit this black box so advertisers can understand better how their campaigns are performing. And how we do this? Well, we came up with a very simple trick in which we add this small piece of code, JavaScript code, inside the advertisement itself. So each time our ad or the ad of an advertiser is delivered to a website, a mobile app, this small piece of code is going to be executed and it's going to report, it's going to collect some information and report it back to a server controlled by the advertiser. So the advertiser, in addition to this standard vendor report it's going to get, it can generate a second report, an independent report created by itself. With this, the advertiser has two advantages. The first one is it can audit the quality of its campaigns itself. And second, it can audit the vendors and check which one are providing inaccurate information, so they can decide who they can trust and who they cannot trust. So with this simple methodology, what we did is put it to work. And we did it in the Google Display Network. At the time of our study, it was the largest advertising network worldwide that was able to reach more than 90% of the internet users. And we did an humble experiment because we didn't have much money to do something at a bigger scale. We ran 8 campaigns that included more than 160,000 impressions of ads and more than that reached more than 7,000 different publishers. In our study, we analyzed a lot of metrics, but for the talk today, I just choose 2 results, okay? 2 results that I hope will convince you of the message I introduced at the beginning. And these 2 results has to do with golden standard in the marketing industry. So the first golden standard is don't let anybody hurt your brand. And this has to do with some concept referred to as brand safety in marketing. And it's very easy to explain. So imagine you are a company that sells toys, right? So you run campaigns and basically you want to get your ads shown in pages or apps appropriate for kids. That's fine. But you don't want to see your ads shown in porn websites, right? This is very bad for the image of your company. It's gonna hurt your image. So this is brand safety. You should avoid the second case here. So what we did was, based on the results we obtained from our campaign, we did very simple analysis. What we did is compute the number of web pages we found with our technique and compare it with those that were reported in the Google AdWords report, right? And here you have a Venn diagram in which you see the intersection. And the result was that 57% of the publishers that we found were not reported by Google AdWords. And this is a serious problem for brand safety because basically that means that your ads as an advertiser are delivered to webs that you don't even know were delivered there. So it's even worse than if the brand safety happens and you know it happened, you can take measures. But in this case, you are blind. You don't know that if it happens, you don't know it is happening, right? So this is the first gold standard. The second golden rule that I want to show you is this one. Don't bore your buyers or your customers with things like this. Show your ads again and again and again and again and again and again. So this is bothering anyone, right? So to avoid this in online advertising, there is a metric you can configure in your campaigns that is called the frequency cap. This basically tells don't show more than X times the ad to a single user, right? But this is something that advanced advertisers with marketing departments know. Small advertisers, they don't know about it. And AdWords was a system that was used by a lot of small advertisers. So what we did is, okay, let's not set up any frequency cap. Let's see what AdWords do with it, right? And here you can see the result. In the x-axis, you see the number of ads that was received by each individual user in our experiment. And in the y-axis, you see the median inter-arrival time between 2 ads. So the time that separates 2 ads. So if we focus on this part here, what we observe is that more than 170 users in the experiment received the impression more than the ads more than 100 times with interval times smaller than 90 seconds. And in some cases, if you go to the stream, there were people that were showing our ads more than 700 times. So this is a lot. So basically, AdWords was breaking this golden rule. And what is worse is you don't have in the AdWords report any information related to this. So advertisers don't know that these things may happen. And basically, these are the 2 things I wanted to share. So there are many more things that we have in the paper. My kids showing up, I'm sorry. No. And this is, I'm sorry, guys. So the conclusion is what I said in the before. If you are an advertiser, don't trust anyone. Just try to assess the quality of your campaign by yourself. And thanks a lot. Any question, I'm happy to answer it.
Okay, thank you a lot, Ruben. We will start while the audience can post questions on the Q&A. We'll start with questions from the panelists.
I can ask one.
So who wants to start?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, so I thought maybe I'll ask a COVID-19 question, seeing as we've just had 2 talks about the coronavirus. So what sort of effects do you think that coronavirus would have had on the dynamics of online advertising? So I imagine a lot of people are staying home, so a lot of people are online a lot more. Maybe they're seeing the adverts too much, and so this affects this boredom factor. Or are there issues with products that have become redundant, and this is going to change which things are going to, I mean, flight airline companies were not flying, so they won't want to adverts.
So that's a good question. We did actually a paper that we submitted recently about this. And basically, what we were checking, I mean, we did our studies focusing on Spain because it was one of the most affected countries, and we had good data for this Spanish market. And the result is that COVID affected a lot to online advertising, right? Because there were many brands, typical brands like hoteling groups or anything related to tourism, air companies, that they stopped doing campaigns online because they couldn't sell their products. And on the other side, you had the people who really got benefit out of the COVID, like Amazon or other big retailers. But these guys stopped
or Zoom,
also,
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, Zoom. But these guys also stopped doing advertising because they were overwhelmed. Everyone were buying from them. So why they should spend money on doing advertising? So the sector was really affected. The number of ads, the demand was decreased over a 50-60% during March and April. But the good part is that the websites were still there, so it seems that it didn't hurt much the what we call the open internet. So basically, newspapers, news sites were still there, despite they were really being affected by this, because all this, I mean, the web, as we know it, is funded by advertising. So basically, if advertising dies, the web, as we know it, dies, right? So we were doing this study to see how resilient was the web, and at least until May, there were not many changes. So we plan to extend this study and see what happens in the future. So we'll see.
Okay, I have a small question. So I wondered, these independent reports, how do they measure where the ads are shown, and so how do you determine the gold standard?
So, I mean, for instance, when you run this code, right, this JavaScript code is gonna get information about what is the website where your ad is being shown, right, and collect other KPIs in the internet. For instance, in online advertising, there is a very important KPI that they call viewability, right? So it's, you should watch an ad for at least 1 second and at least 50% of the ad, then they charge for this ad. Otherwise, they don't charge for this ad, right? So this is an important metric. So we have compared with our technique. We have compared in another piece of work how our technique works with one of the most important commercial tools. And we have proved that our solution perform better than the commercial tool, right? But advertisers don't know it. So basically, they have these results and they tell you, 90% of your ads were viewed. Fine,
Yes.
you pay for 90% of your ads, but you don't know if they really were viewed or not.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Nick. I'll give you the word.
Yeah, voila. Yeah, I was wondering, so you generate independent reports for how the advertisements are shown, but do you also have measures for how successful an advertisement is? For example, how many leads it generates or something? Or is this harder to do?
Yeah, I mean, in advertising, there are different KPIs, as I mentioned. So the one that we can measure because it is related to the ad is if at the end there was a click on the ad and then this person is sent to the website of the advertiser. So that's what is called the click-through ratio. So how many of your ads, or which rate of your ads create a click, right? And then there is a follow-up tracking that happens on the website of the advertiser. So that's tracking very much depends if the advertiser allows you to put tracking code on their website or not. And the most important KPI is what they call the conversion rate. That is basically what is the number of ads that at the end ends up if you are selling something, right, in a real sale of a product, right, like in Amazon, for instance, or if if you want people to fill a form, how many forms you got filled by people. So all this tracking, it's happening, but sometimes it requires collaboration with the advertiser.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a small follow-up question. In Google,
Question in Q&A.
Sorry? No, there's I don't see a question in Q&A.
That was the last one, I think.
Yes, there was a question by Nick. In Google, you pay per click, right? Or you pay per view?
There are different schemes on how they charge this. So basically, the two most common one are the CPM, they call cost per mile, and the CPC, cost per click. The CPM basically pay for a price for each 1,000 ads you show. So basically, for 1,000 ads that are shown, even if the user click or not, you pay for it. It costs $1, and then you have the clicks, and you pay based on. And typically, they charge you for both. Basically, okay, you pay for every 1,000 impression, and then you pay for every click you get.
Because if you pay per click, there is no reason for Google to cheat, or do you think it's on purpose that they underreport, or do you have an insight in why?
I mean, they benefit from all this lack of transparency. So we have a different piece of work I can tell you about, and this was about YouTube. Basically, we're measuring if Google was fighting fraud in YouTube, right? So basically, I can put my own video in YouTube, and I can just create bots that visit my video. So this basically generates visits, and I can just, if there are ads shown together with my video, I get some money. So this is the simplest fraud model that you can find for videos or websites. So what we found, we did a paper in which we just run bots to our own videos, and we play the role of advertisers. And what we found is that Google had a double accounting system. So basically, it has an accounting system for the counter you see along with the video, right? And they have another counter that was the number of visits that were monetized. And these two counters didn't match to each other. And we proved that there were some visits that were fraudulent because we were doing them, that they were discounted for this public view counter, the one that is along with the video, but they were charged to us as an advertiser, right? So Google was playing this type of trick, and why this happened, we never know. I mean, we talked to Google, but they never explained why this was happening. but at the end they have incentives. I mean, they don't have the strong incentives to make their activity transparent or to have a strong fight against fraud, etc., etc., etc. And basically, our work, I mean, we never claim that, we don't really think that Google or any company, in general, big company, are bad guys, that they want to do bad things. So there are complex systems, there are a lot of people there, as in any place, there will be good people, bad people, but there are things that are obvious that are wrong, right? And they have to fix them. So basically, we are just trying to just make this viable to everyone, that these things are happening and this should be fixed.
Indeed, so to push for transparency.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move to the last speaker, Neema from Tanzania. We'll launch the last poll. So Neema, sorry, from Tanzania is a computer science assistant lecturer at the Nelson Mandela Africa Institute of Science and Technology. She has a PhD in informatics and communication science from the same university. And she's passionate about education, particularly of girls. And she is founder of the BakiShule Initiative, of which I guess you will definitely speak, which aims to prevent student dropout from school. So let's have a look if everyone can vote. Okay, the polling is closed. So 2 questions. What do you think are the challenges for the adoption of AI and data science in Africa? Communication, financial constraints, or politics? So most people, 2/3 think, or half of them, politics, and then financial constraints and communication. But everyone is really convinced there are opportunities for AI and data science in Africa. I'm curious to hear your opinion, Neema.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I'm so excited to give a talk, and as the first year presenter from Africa, so let me take you to Africa. So Africa, as the second largest continent, is experiencing several challenges in different sectors such as agriculture, health, that can be solved by using the power of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. And this has been proven in industrialized countries, whereby they've been using these emerging technologies on solving various problems. In the past few years, different initiatives such as Data Science Africa, Deep Learning Indaba, Zindi, Women in Machine Learning, and Black in Artificial Intelligence have been established for the aim of promoting and strengthening artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science in Africa. And at our institution, we have an amazing AI community that aim to motivate more students to conduct AI-related research. But why Africa is behind in adopting these technologies? Despite all the efforts which has been done, we're experiencing several challenges, started with the issue of perception. Whereby many people, they still don't believe on the power of these emerging technologies on solving various problems which we are facing. So they think that it is not possible to come up with a machine learning model that will solve maybe health-related problem or agriculture-related problem. And another challenge is on the issue of data. We lack public available data set to support our research activity in the field. And there is bureaucracy even when to find those data sets. So this discourages a lot of researchers to conduct research in this area of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. And since this is an emerging technology, especially in Africa, so we have shortage number of experts in the field. So we highly depend on experts who are found outside the continent. And we have a shortage amount of funds to facilitate research activities in this area. Okay, I personally have experienced some of these challenges when I was conducting my PhD study, and I was applying machine learning techniques on addressing the problem of student dropout in secondary schools as one of the challenges which face education sector in Africa. So starting with the data set, our data set were highly imbalanced, so we applied different data balancing techniques on handling the issue. And SMOT, which is synthetic minority oversampling techniques with edited nearest neighbor, show the good results with our data sets. And we use 4 algorithms, which are logistic regression, multilayer perceptron, random forest, and k-nearest neighbor, to develop the model. And the evaluation of the model is done using adjacent geometric mean, and F measure. Then the well-performed model was then deployed into developed web-based prototype, we call it BakiShule, in order to allow education stakeholders to easily interact with the developed approach since they had no knowledge on machine learning. So when conducted this study, it took me about 1 year to find the data set, so you can find how terrible it was. And in the beginning, people, they didn't even understand what I was doing. They didn't believe that it is possible to come up with a machine learning model that will early identify at-risk student of dropout. So they highly believe on their traditional approach of waiting until the student drop out of school, rather than believing that technology can do something better than that. Until I came up with this BakiShule is when people started to believe that the power of machine learning model on early identification of at-risk student of dropping out. And on the other hand, this research brought opportunities for me. Since I was interested in this area, I was being able to travel the world and present my research findings in different AI conferences inside and outside Africa. And through that, I've been able to motivate others to conduct AI-related research and inspire young generation, especially girls, by cementing their understanding on AI at their earlier stage of their career development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's start again with questions from the panelists. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I was wondering your PhD project about when you were using machine learning to predict the dropout of students in a school. Can you tell us what were the results of that? Like, what were the factors which influenced the most student dropped out in Africa?
Okay, so at first our data set was having about 18 features, which were so many. So we conducted a feature selection in order to observe which features shows high contribution to the dropout prediction. And we found that the first feature was student gender, which shows strongly contribution to the dropout prediction, followed by the if parent check the child book. There is also issue of if the parent read with a child, also associated with the student dropout. And the other issue of if parent discuss progress with a teacher, and meals per day were also included, together with the issue of latrines were also considered in our model. So those well-performed features were included in our prototype as input information.
Thank you. And do you already, because, so as far as I understand, you made this model and you also founded this foundation where they're actually now using your model to stop students from dropping out by figuring out. Do you already have some kind of results of what are the effects of this? Do you already have some kind of positive feedback about it's working or not?
Yes, we have. We did an evaluation in order to observe how this model is started to help people in those schools which they've started to use it. And we found that about 85%, they say that it's helped a lot to early identify those students before they drop out of school. So we have seen the impact of this technology on early identification of this at-risk student.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question. I wondered, did you talk about this initiative to policymakers and how do they respond? How do they respond to AI and the possibility to improve policies using AI and machine learning?
Yes, we have done it a lot, and we also continue to give awareness to people. Since this is an emerging technology, so you see other people, their perception is kind of, they don't even believe it in the first time. But we keep on giving awareness, especially to policymakers, even if through our research, we share our research findings with them and try to show them the power of this technology on addressing several challenges in different sectors in Africa.
Okay. And are there plans to scale? I don't know, you're working now with, what are the plans, bigger plans or future plans?
Yes, I'm planning to scale up a lot because through these initiatives, it's not only about that, developing a prototype and end up that. So we keep on doing a sensitization event to those young generation, especially girls, to motivate them in different areas and to promote them by cementing their understanding on AI at their earlier stage. Because you can find here in Africa, other people, they come to understand AI when they reach at university level, and it's kind of too late. So we are trying to use this time to create awareness, especially to young generation, to understand what is AI and what they can do with AI in solving various problems which we are facing.
Okay, so it has a double purpose. It's on one hand fighting dropout, but at the same time also inspiring young children already with the benefits of AI. Okay.
Yes.
Are there other questions from the panelists? I have a question from the audience, from Nick. He deserves a prize, I think. Let me give you the floor. Here you go.
Yeah, thank you for the lecture. Yeah, my question was, next to predicting dropouts, do you think that there are other possible quick wins for machine learning and AI in Africa, maybe to get some exposure or trust in the system?
What? I didn't get it.
Yeah, so you now made a model to predict dropouts in schools in Africa. Yeah, are there other kind of models that you could make that is tailored towards Africa that would show the value of AI to convince policymakers, for example?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we have other problems, especially in different sectors, such as in agriculture. When you can develop a model that can even detect a disease in a plant, maybe in a tomato, in a beans, in a sunflower, and so forth, because we have a lot of problems that can be solved by the power of AI. So we can even apply those model in, we can do a computer vision to check a detection of the disease in the sunflower, in the tomato, or we can do a detection of kind of disease which we have here in Africa. So it's very powerful to use this technology on addressing our problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, let me check if there's still another question. So I've had maybe a last one. Do you think, how do you see the future in general for Africa? Do you think there will be really a large adoption in a few years, or how do you think, what's your feeling about the future of data science in Africa?
So for my feeling, I feel like the future is bright, because starting with my institution, they have increased a lot of number of students who are conducted AI related research. And not only in my institution, even outside our institution, in Tanzania, maybe there are a lot of people currently they've started to use these technologies, especially in academic purpose, to conduct different research. So we are hoping for the years to come, a lot of people, their awareness will be there, and a lot of people, they will understand the power of these technologies on addressing different issues. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Let me check. Okay, then thank you. I want to thank all 4 speakers, and Lito has prepared a little poem because he's leading the Brussels GAG. So Lito, maybe a last few words before you leave for Maastricht.
Sure. You've thrown me with the poem part. I haven't really got a poem, sorry. Yeah, so this is normally the point in the evening where I would be telling you all to finish your drinks and move on downstairs. But the one bonus of this virtual format is you can take your time now and drink your beers in peace. But yeah, so I'd just like to say thanks to all the speakers and all the attendees in the Zoom, and also everyone who's live streaming via YouTube. It's been, I think, a really nice event. I'm sorry that my last event is this online one, but I just want to say thanks to everyone who's been involved in DataBeers so far, and thanks also to my my collaborators in the DataBeers Brussels. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Oh,
Thank
and
you.
also don't forget the survey tomorrow to fill it in.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
And hope to see you soon on a real live event. Huh?
Yes, and all the speakers have whenever you see me, you have a beer for me and us. So yeah, don't forget to get it.
Thank you guys for organizing this. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Enjoy your beers.